Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. We have a very exciting episode today with Anna Lukasiak, who is a project manager, expert in enterprise and in startup software. Anna had worked across several categories in finance, in tech, in nonprofit, and recently spoke about AI at the PMI conference. So, all in all, a very accomplished project management professional. And we're excited to have you, Anna. And our question, of course, is what's on your mind?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Eric. Hi, Elena. Hi, everybody who's watching. So what's on my mind? It's Friday, and Friday is actually a very big day for project managers. This is when we do our weekly status reports. But it's also a really good time to think about the plan for next week, a reflection. Okay, did we achieve what we wanted to do? What kind of escalation I'm going to need to do on Monday based on when I see the risks right now. So that's usually what's on my Fridays, just project management, boring stuff. And I'm super grateful to all the companies that have implemented no meetings on Friday, because I can actually do my job as a project manager.
So speaking of these companies, Anna, scaling technology, what are the quirks and little interesting ahas in this process that are different in scaling other categories?
So I'm going to talk specifically about software organizations, right? Because technology also has the hardware piece, and as everybody knows, cloud solutions are the best. I'm not an expert on cloud solutions. However, I work a lot with organizations when we have to grow IT organization, meaning the software side. And I think the biggest thing people don't realize, if you do it right from the very beginning, it's actually very easy formula to scale. So you start with your team, your small team, cross-functional, sort of organizing team. Then you need a little bit more features built out faster. Well, what you do, you create the same team over again and you scale it. No more than 7 to 9 people max, right? And you follow the same template. So it's actually very important to kind of when you're a startup, when you're designing your first team, do it the right way. Do it as if it was an enterprise, because all you're going to be doing, you're not going to be adding developers to your 7-person team. What you're going to be doing is starting a new team. You need more bandwidth. You need more stuff to be built. Create a 3rd team, 4th team, 5th team, the same way, right? So that kind of a scaling strategy, I think, is the best one. A lot of people don't think about it that way, and they create the first team, and it's like 20 people. I'm like, how do you even develop anything with 20 people? Like, try to align 20 people, not possible, right? So I would say that's the best strategy. Another thing that's really good that a lot of people don't think about is that they try to hire developers from the start. What I always recommend, get contractors. And there's so many really good companies, not even the big ones, but small and medium-sized companies that give you talent in teams. So, I need a developer team with a product person and tester. They give you the whole team, the 7 people in a package, right? And those are your contractors. Go ahead.
Question for you, Anna. So actually, consulting in small companies in the past, for example, the one company I'm thinking of hired, it's actually no longer in existence, longer story, but in any case, they hired software people. This is a West Coast biotech company, whereas most of the companies that I live on the East Coast, and they hired these West Coast engineers. West Coast engineers, of course, are much more pure software or whatever. They are obsessive about. So I'm used to this really small company. There's only one of me or a couple of people working on my team, and we're building features as fast as we can to get people to do their work ready. And these people, these software engineer first type of people, as opposed to science first people, they were so focused on agile and all of the trappings of the agile approach. And what does this mean? And making sure you got your tracking and your credits and whatever you call it. And I definitely clash with these people, because this is so much about process and it's not about getting the features out. And so how can you kind of reconcile? And I'm not saying that there's a I'm not saying it's a bad idea to use the agile approach, but how do you reconcile that sort of the process becomes almost more important than the product kind of approach? And I think that created problems in that example.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you asked that question. So I think, first of all, I'm going to be siding with the West Coasters on this one with the process, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, in software development, software developers are used to certain model. So if you need to create a different model and have them fit in, good luck. They're going to take some time to get adjusted, and they're actually going to be slower, right? So they like the agile model. Like anybody I hired who was a software developer, like if you have agile organization, easy, fit them in. They know how to do this. They know, what's expected of them. With older organizations that had waterfall before, and now they're trying to migrate to agile, that's much harder. You're getting all those people from the street who are agile, but the organization is not. And it's clashing with management all the time, right? So it's actually harder. Like I find large organizations that are in transition to agile are the hardest to get staffed. But going back to, how do I reconcile them? I find that like I usually get hired because the project failed. Like something didn't go right? We're like 3 years into the project. We haven't done anything. We spent all the budget 3 times over. What do we do? What are we doing wrong? And I find a lot of times it's actually we either have the wrong plan or we're missing the goal or like just something up front, like in the planning is not well defined. So when your West Coasters come in and saying, oh, we want a backlog, we want to prioritize, we want to estimate it, we have to have the definition of ready. Why? Because they're trying to ensure that we understand what we're building. Once we have alignment between the business and the software developers, what we're building, the building is easy. Right. But where we fail is that alignment is not there. Right. So they follow the process to ensure that whatever they're building, the product owner or the business is not going to come back. That's not what I want. Right.
I think Eric, I've obviously worked with very large organizations, never in development roles, but I've certainly seen that from afar, whether it was on development or other project management, non-software project management stuff. And, the reality is that, these you could see like the company sort of graveyard of all these projects that just, people spent three years trying to get them done and they never got them done. And 90% of the time, Anna, what you just said is exactly the problem is you didn't define up front what the goal was. And so when you have a team that's that large, you can't have everybody acting in alignment. Whereas I think, Eric, in your situation, what you're talking about is when you're a one-man band or a two-person band or whatever, you're essentially just, you don't need as much process because you're just doing it back and forth. You turn around and talk to the person next to you, whatever. But the moment you get past, I don't know, Anna, if you, it's probably more than like 2 people. Like you probably are toast.
I actually do have that question. Like, what's the magic number of people where turning agile on would be beneficial?
That's a great question. I think above one team, and one team is 7 to 9, and like you can probably survive without agile, with a smaller team. So let's say 5 developers, 1 product owner, 1 tester. That's 7, right? Anything above that, you really need to do it the right way.
Got it. And I think that's where my kind of conflict with this was. We were not, the team wasn't delivering features because they were so worried about the process. And we were, there was only 3 people total, in the software organization. And it's like, you gotta get the function, like when you're that early of a startup. And these were not, by the way, these weren't software companies. These were biotech companies. Like it was a sideshow. So it was like a sideshow. It was an enabling function, I should call it. And so I think that's part of the difference is like when you're purely like early startup, you just got to move pretty fast because otherwise you're going to run out of your runway before you get the feature out.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, because Eric and I don't know, Eric, if you finished the book, but we were reading this book. I just finished it a couple of weeks ago, but I think, Eric, you're still reading it. It's called the E-Myth, or the E-Myth Revisited. It's about entrepreneurship and so forth. And essentially the basic idea, it's not a project management situation, but it talks about startups and how, as you start building a startup and you start scaling a startup, you actually should be thinking about the business as it will be when it is larger, as opposed to thinking about it as it is now. Because what will happen is, inevitably, if you don't think about it that way, then you will have very inconsistent processes and it'll be unclear. And then the moment you get to 3 people or 4 people or whatever, now you've got this problem where nobody knows who's doing what and whatever, and you actually lose more time than you gain. So I don't
It's
know.
interesting because in reality, very few people do think like that at a startup. And in one of my prior roles, I lived through the agile transition, right? And I have to say, people do like agile better because it introduces transparency. And we were a grown-up startup, so we were no longer a startup, too many people, everything is flying all over the place, nobody knows where everything is. And then you introduce a very kind of systematic approach to it. And I definitely can see that it's welcomed.
Yeah. I want to kind of jump in and say something to what Jeff said about the entrepreneurs. I have a lot of respect for serial entrepreneurs. So those guys who start a company and at certain size sell, and they do it over and over and over again. And to me, they're like at heart project managers, because they have a system, they have a process, they know exactly what to do over and over and over again and be successful. So to me, as a software development project manager, it's the same thing. Like, do you think I do different things depending on clients? A little bit. I tweak depending where they are, or the size, or maybe specific information. But it's the same thing. First thing is, are we aligned with the business? Do we understand what we're building? Right? Do we have the right team? Do we have the right communication channels? Right? Do we have the right transparency? What's going on? And I guarantee it's the same problems from company to company, and the same way to fix them.
Yeah, and it's funny, as you're saying that, I just had this sudden thought about. I used to, many years ago, a very long time ago, I was a physics and math teacher, and I used to say to my students would say to me, well, is it okay if I do the problem my way? And I said, if it's correct, yes, but if it's wrong, no, because I'm not going to give you any partial credit trying to figure out your crazy way of doing it. Do it the way that you've been taught to do it, and so forth. I don't know whether that was a great pedagogical technique, but it's a little bit what you're talking about of, hey, if it works to do it, kind of in this random ad hoc fashion, great. But if it doesn't work, it's very hard to kind of figure out where things went wrong, go backtrack, fix the problem, and whatever. And so it's a risk, right? Your chances of ending up mired down, and then they have to hire you, right? You come in and fix it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, it's not just for software engineers, but a lot of other professions. I call them it's like a science and art what they do. So that what I'm trying to say is that they have to get into their zone. And sometimes, it takes half an hour to set up your environment and think and start looking at the code. And they really need about 4 hours without interruptions to deliver something really good. If you schedule their work or their day so they constantly are interrupted, the cost of context switching is super high. So usually when and this is probably why also a lot of the software developers do like Agile, because we tend to have a call in the morning, we align, and off we go. Everybody goes to their desk, and they set up their environment and get into the code and actually develop, right? And the next morning you come back and you review it. So it gives them kind of like a cadence or routine, right? That helps them to focus on regular basis, on daily basis. And really, also when you think of Agile, it's all about you create a baseline for how much the team delivers. And after that, through retrospectives and reviews, what can we do better? You tend to increase the velocity, so increase the throughput. So again, there's a process for that. So it's built in. And I think it's really for developers, not so much for maybe, the product managers or the executives, but it's really optimizes how developers work. So if you understand that they need space and they need to be clear what they're doing, and then you leave them alone for 8 hours, you're going to get much more than constantly being in their face.
So I have a little bit of a shift in topic, but I'm really curious.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So obviously data science and generative AI and whatever is hugely in discussions or whatever. And I'm a fan of an author who is a namesake of mine. His name's Eric Sigel as well. I don't know if you know. Do you know who he is? Have you heard of his book? And he talked. This is his latest book, which came out I don't know, several months ago. By the way, he's going to be a guest on our podcast.
Oh, nice.
We snagged him because we are namesakes. But anyway, he talks about this, like, how do you plan for the data science project to get it to actually be functional or whatever? And I'm just curious, and and it sounds like you were talking to some degree about this. I'm not sure whether you're focused more on using AI in project management or working through project management on AI projects. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what in this sort of new realm of AI projects, what is everything kind of similar to software projects, or is it a little bit of a different animal when you're talking about generative AI and data science?
I'm glad you asked that question. So I actually spoke twice at PMI conference. My first talk last year was about using ChatGPT for project management. So like, I have a specific risk of ChatGPT. What kind of mitigation strategies can you suggest, right? Mm-hmm. Things like that. Or I'm putting together project charter. Help me put it together. Yep. I describe my project, what I'm doing with it. So this year, I switched it and I talked about, okay, now I'm project manager. I'm doing software projects, and 90% of my projects are becoming AI projects. There's component of AI, right? So I can talk to both sides. So what are the kind of things that to watch out for? So my talk was actually about the pitfalls, because when it comes to strategy, how you manage them, there's still many strategies, and I think the industry hasn't decided which is the best. Maybe we have a couple of strategies or methodologies for this. However, the pitfalls are the same, right? So I talked about the pitfalls and strategies to overcome them. So the first thing, 80% of AI projects is data. Collecting data, cleaning data, understanding data, figuring out what it is, making sure you have legal access to it. You don't have copyright problems. Make sure you have privacy issues covered, like all that stuff, right? 80%. Data. Okay, so when we get the data, then we have to pick up a model, and it's not like just we take one off the shelf. We try this model, that model, and we start small, and then we scale it up and see how it performs. So for that, you need to have a lot of metrics up front, like about performance. When are we going to say this is good enough, right? So you don't have functional requirements anymore, like in a software projects, but you have metrics for outcomes. I want to improve this by 20%. Okay. Let's iterate, see what happens, right? It's very experimental in nature. And then you experiment a little bit, you get close to production, and then you realize, well, it's either not performing, maybe your pilot, gave you very bad results. Maybe your regulators came in and said, nope, you can't do that in this state. Like with the Facebook, I don't know if you remember what happened. They paid like $1.4 billion because in Texas, you cannot use facial recognition necessarily, or people's face to run AI models. So again, another quote, 87% of data projects or AI projects never make it to production, right? So I think what the big shift is that you have to focus on data, and then you have to be ready for iteration. So iterate, and obviously agile is the only way to do it, right? So it provides you with the structure, very, very rigid structure, not rigid, but disciplined structure, how you iterate and you review, you do your retrospective, and then you have your metrics and you check it again. Am I improving, or is it getting worse? Should I scrap it? Should I change it? What do we do? So there's a lot of it's almost like running a lab, like being a Thomas Edison here, when he was coming up with light bulb, you could experiment, but also have way to measure your experiment, right? Evaluate, okay, am I moving in the right direction?
So here's one follow-up question before I release the other hosts here. Obviously AI is useful as a project manager, as a target of project management, but actually one thing I'm curious about is, talk anecdotally, people say, oh, with Copilot or with whatever it is, I can write code so much faster or whatever. Are you actually seeing these projects move forward faster because of the AI technology aiding them to write the code?
Yeah, absolutely. It's faster if they know what they're doing. It's not faster if they know, because then we spend time debugging too much, right? But if you have experienced programmer, they can go so much faster with ChatGPT code, because remember, a lot of the code is already online, right? It's open source, and ChatGPT is very good if you have a lot of data and you train it on a lot of data. So in my experience, at least with the developers I work with, they're more effective with copilots. And sometimes they have multiple versions, and which version should we pick? And they start debating for the future. This is better, that's not better, right? Great, have your conversations. I say yes, unless you get somebody who doesn't know how to use the tool or is not really a good developer. Then you get in serious trouble.
So while we're talking about ChatGPT, we always like to have ChatGPT jump in and ask a couple of questions. And so I always ask, I think ChatGPT is getting better at understanding my question. It's probably true. Because I used to ask it for funny questions to ask an expert in, whatever, scaling, software development businesses or something, whatever. And it used to give me a mix of what I would call absurd and thought-provoking. And so I used to ask people, would you like absurd and thought-provoking? But recently, it's actually only giving me absurd. So I'm just
So you think that it's getting better, Jeff? I feel like that.
Well, so Jeff,
I asked for funny stuff. It's being funnier. Actually, this one might be a little bit thought-provoking. It says, what grows faster, a well-structured tech startup or your to-do list on Monday?
I'm pretty good with my to-do list. I mean, it always grows, but I'm good at cutting it out.
I don't know if that's a good question for a project manager.
Yeah, I think if I don't do anything, definitely my to-do list. However, I always think of my to-do list as not me actually doing things off the list, but fixing the process so the team does it automatically and I don't need to follow up. So I'm proactive. It's I'm gonna make sure it doesn't grow. It's not gonna grow, right? But I'm not very fast at if you ask me to track 20 things, I'm going to be slow at it. But if I implement a Jira system with some dashboards and some reporting, I'm now it tracks the 20 teams. I don't need to do it.
Yeah. Well, so here's my second question. I think there's actually maybe a thought-provoking question hidden behind this. This is I'll tell you my thoughts if you don't go. What's the secret to scaling gracefully? Automated pipelines or carefully timed snacks?
Carefully timed snacks? You mean feeding the developers?
I think the way I'm going to take this question is it the technology or is it the people? Is really the question. I think that's.
It's a really good question, and I have heard this before. Do you put more emphasis on process or more emphasis on people? And honestly, you have to do both. Because if you have process that is slowing down people, it's not gonna work. So you need to spend money on the process and make sure it actually works for the people, because people need to be motivated, right? But if you just focus on giving the snacks or the free fruit baskets like we used to do back in the old days, right? To make sure developers stay after 7 p.m. and handle all the evening batches.
Right.
If they don't have a good process, they're just gonna do stupid things that take a lot of time, right? They don't want it. Honestly, no developer wants to work after 7 unless they're night owls, right? Some people start at 7, but I'm saying they don't want to work 12 hours a day if you don't have to, right? So if you have a process, project management process is usually to optimize how we work, to make things faster, to make things better. So you need to balance them and think about it carefully. And I would never say do a process just for sake of process. You need to think how to motivate people with your process that you set up. And reduce the load on project managers so we don't need to track too much. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think that goes back to sort of Eric, the original conversation, right? Of the process is designed to enable the people to get the work done, and if it's not, then you have to tweak the process, not get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to chime in and go back to something we talked about earlier, which is using AI tools. And you, Anna, you mentioned that for those developers that know how to use them, they become lightning fast and produce high quality work. And the other batch who does not know how to use them pale in comparison, right? So that kind of creates a division in workforce, a division in deliverables. And how should businesses approach that and benefit rather than, lose out because of that?
So I'm thinking I can answer it kind of two ways. So I'm generally a big fan of using contracting companies to get the whole team, because I know they're pretty level, they're on the same level, the developers they put together. So you're not going to have somebody who doesn't know anything and somebody who is pretty good. They usually spend a lot of time vetting them. So they're pretty good on average. So whatever they're using, generative AI for, to help them with code, like copilots or not, it's usually consistent. So that's part of the answer. Now, let's say you have a team that's composed of, a couple internal employees, couple external contractors, maybe from a different team. Yes, you're going to have the discrepancy. It's tricky because I think it depends how well the team gels. Sometimes they do, and they actually start passing kind of their best lessons how to the others. So the team actually grows together. But sometimes it doesn't, because there may be a kind of animosity towards the contractors. Oh, they're taking my jobs, right? So I don't want to learn from them. And I find actually the contractors in most cases are very good. Like, I don't have any complaints. Like, if you vet it to the company that provides teams, I don't have any problems. I think more often I may even have a problem with an employee who has been working for 20 years in the company. They may understand all the legacy systems. They may have all the history. However, they're not as open to new things, and they may not be as open to using, ChatGPT to help them or any other copilot.
Okay, so I want to
Mm-hmm.
turn us towards the dark side of project management. You brought this up earlier. Like, you are usually brought in when things have gone sideways. So
a little,
tell us a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but sometimes that's what you're brought in to help fix the problems. What is in your kind of vast experience of all these projects, like, what causes projects to go sideways, and like what goes wrong?
I would say in the big percentage, I kind of blame lack of communication, and this is a very, very broad sense, because I think I mentioned that at the beginning. The team is given to do X. Very often they're given a project plan and say a couple wireframes do this. But then, like, when I start talking to the business users, okay, what are you trying to achieve with this? And it turns out, like, we're trying to build this to do that. Are you serious? Like, this is the wrong project, right? So it's that lack of communication between the business and the product team that's trying to develop something. And I would tell you 90% that's the problem. Like, they're trying to build something, and constantly when they're releasing many pieces or like small deployments, the business says, that's not what I want. This is wrong. It's not working. Oh, this team is not delivering. But you asked them to do this, right? Why don't you tell them you state your goal? What do you want to do with this? Right? You want to do X. Let them kind of adjust. Let them give you feedback and say, you know what? If you want to do X, this is the wrong thing to do.
Right.
We should go in a different direction.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, and it's true, whether it's a software project or any other project, you don't start from, are we aligned on end goals? You end up with this constant back and forth, because frankly, I've been on the other side of that. It's a lot of times the business side doesn't know what they want, because they don't even know what's possible. And so they say, I need X, Y, and Z that does this. And you don't start from the goal, then you're going to get this thing that, the developers might have been like, this is never going to be right. And then you're sort of stuck with it. And now you're just trying to fix the wrong thing, because that's already done, right? There's like a sort of a bias to kind of keep the work you've already done. Whereas, I guess the flip side is, how do you get the the technical folks to really be interested and ask these questions, as opposed to say, oh, I know how to do this, or I know better than people, whatever. That's the flip side, is, how you end up with people sort of coming up with a solution, and then the business is like, I don't know what you're doing. That's not right.
I always say it's your product owner or your product manager, right? Because they are the in between. So they need to really understand the vision of the business, but they also need to be good communicators with developers. They need to understand, how do I talk to them, right? And the product owner is usually dedicated to the development team. So they have a lot of discussions. Sometimes they may argue, they may disagree, they may do like, okay, so let me do like a little pilot for you to explain my solution, product owner. And the product owner says, yeah, let me do some wireframes because I think this is supposed to work differently. But that interaction that's how you resolve this conflict. Right? Because generally business people are so like the end users. Let's say it's my sales department, my operations, or maybe end customer who's going to use the product. They're so far removed. It's very difficult to ask them. Like you can do surveys maybe. That's why you have the proxies, your product owner. They have that vision, but they're also good communicator with the developers.
Right. Now we see this a lot though in the agency side, whereas the person who is, the product owner has to really truly be the owner, because what you end up with is they develop something with the team, and then all of a sudden their boss or their boss's boss's cousin's sister's child or whatever used it and liked something. I mean, we used to get Elena we used to get that all the time when we were developing Oreo flavors or something. Like, well, my niece likes pumpkin flavored Oreo or whatever, crazy stuff. But how do you get people to how do you deal with that problem? How do you stop this creep of like, hey, the person who's giving all the feedback, and then suddenly at the last the 11th hour somebody pops in and goes, no, I want it different.
Yeah. So generally, like my favorite types of project managers or product managers or product owners are people from the business who are certified as product owners or product managers, because it's a different skill set that you need to pick up. You kind of have to be like a business person, business analyst, a bit of project manager, but also be understand the lingo, the language that the developers talk, right? And then you can be the right person. So very often when I get a, let's say product owner, and it's a great developer, it's a great business person, but they were never certified. And I asked them, what's the backlog? I don't know what the backlog is. All right, here you go, right? Like you can't do that. You can't skip that step. You need to certify them. Sometimes it's a weekend class, sometimes it's a week course. I always advise all my clients, please do send them, because it's going to change. It's going to really dramatically increase your success, because this person needs to also understand what their role is and how to interact with developers. But I do like generally business people to be in that role, because the business side is intuitive to them.
Right.
If they come more from technology side, they need to do a lot of surveys. They have tools to do that, but they struggle more with the business. They don't have that intuition because they never did the business side.
So, Anna, thank you so much. We are coming up actually past the half-hour point. And as I know, it goes by so quickly, and this was so interesting, and we could keep talking about this. I feel like I say this every week, but it's actually true. We could just keep talking about this. But before we go, what we like to do is go around each of us and give one thing we want to leave our audience with. What I don't usually tell the guests, and I didn't tell you either, is that we always make the guest go first, and so you don't have any time to think about it. So, Anna, what's one thing you would like to leave our guests with?
Think of project managers as enablers for your organization, and not the person that is stopping you from developing that product or is slowing you down.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great one thing. Before I jump in with my one thing, Anna, what is the best place for people to reach you?
I think the two best places is to send me email at contact@datagallery.io. or just LinkedIn. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm usually very good at responding to that.
Sorry,
Awesome.
my banner game is not doing. I'm not doing a great job.
A little slow. You probably needed a project manager to get that right there.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually, this is something we ran out of time to talk about, but I'm a huge fan of professional project manager and that role. And actually had a person that worked for me for a while in the marketing world who was sort of looking for like, what do I want to do next? And ended up, we had a long conversation. She told me that, kind of what things she was interested in. I said, there's an opening over in the project management team. And she went and did that. And that was probably at this point, maybe 8 years ago. And she's been a project manager ever since and has loved it. At least, the last time I heard from her, she actually sent me a note on LinkedIn, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, but like maybe 6 years after that conversation or something. And she said, I am so glad that you pushed me to do this. This has been such a great move, career move and so forth. And I think for me, the one thing is just letting people know that this is a profession. I think for this person I'm thinking of, she had no idea, even working in a big company, that there was such a thing as a professional project manager. And I think it's hugely valuable, hugely needed, and definitely something that people should, have on their radar. Young people or people sort of looking to, sort of change up their career a bit, should have on their radar. And I will pass it to Elena.
Yes. So in my case, the fascinating aha is the fact that smaller companies should scale in teams, which is it really makes perfect sense when you say it, but I so rarely see it in reality that I find it fascinating. So I'm going to think about it a lot.
Yeah, definitely a good one, Elena, because, especially as Jeff and I are starting to get Twinning Edge off the ground, and hopefully, Elena, you'll be doing more and more with us, as well as like, how do we think about that in terms of that E-Myth that Jeff was talking about and these teams. And it's not just the software engineers. The thing I want to leave with is that what I'm hearing from you, Anna, is that LLMs are making a huge positive impact on multiple different in multiple different ways, in enabling enabling people to do project management and enabling the constituents, the coders, the whatever, to get their work done, drive the agenda faster, but that there's that caveat of you just got to make sure that you really understand what you're driving towards in order to not have that. Those projects can go off the rails just as much as any of the more traditional ones. So that's really fascinating. Anna, this was great. I love, well, from my background as a former head of a data science and scientific computing group, it's really interesting to hear this perspective. So thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.